So managing peer-to-peer campaigns, I think most people here are running peer-to-peer campaigns, hopefully, because otherwise you might not find this particularly relevant. And if that is the case, feel free to just drop out. It's fine. I won't be offended if you feel like it's not for you. So today we're going to talk about analysis and optimization of peer-to-peer campaigns. And obviously by peer-to-peer, we mean online events on fundraising. People, either it's a ticketed event or it's just a registration. They're coming through that registration flow, buying a ticket, whatever it is that they're doing, and then they're getting a fundraising page. And the way that we kind of like to look at things is there's kind of a couple of elements that are really important in that process. For you, obviously, the most important one is that getting people into the funnel, into the registration flow. Now, we can't really help you with that. That's kind of, I guess, that's the side of things that you guys take care of. What we can help you with, though, is the next section. So the next important one is obviously everybody that you get into that funnel to be able to get them to complete the registration flow. And obviously, there's lots of things that can be done there to tweak things and best practice to make sure that there is that I guess the best chance of people actually completing the registration flow. And we'll talk about what kind of numbers are important around that as well. And then the next thing is obviously it's great to have loads of participants, but you really want them to fundraise as well. So how do we look at the numbers for things like participation rates, and how do we predict those numbers? What are those key indicators that somebody is likely to be a good fundraiser for your organisation? So we'll run through some insights on that sort of stuff. Okie dokie. So if we click into the next one. So we're going to do some definitions to begin with, because sometimes the fundraising terminology might not always be exactly what you're used to from your previous fundraising software, or just the way you talk internally about things. So if you, obviously we don't want to force our definitions onto you and our terminology onto you, still call it whatever you want, but just so that you understand what you're looking at in fundraising. And of course we want to talk about what's normal around, as I said, completion rates, average dollars raised, and propensity to fundraise. So the person's actual, how likely are they to fundraise? And then we've got a section on reporting to keep everyone informed. It's really, I guess the thing that we focus on here is financial reporting. I don't know about your own experience, but if the finance people are happy with the reporting, that's great for everybody, because it just means that they're not going to come to you with a whole load of questions asking you what this means and what that means. If you can make sure that that reporting for them is top notch, they get all the information that they want, and there's a lot of stuff that's kind of pre-built into fundraising to help you do that, then you'll probably find your life is a little quieter when it comes to finance people. Okay, not that they're the enemy or anything like that, but we just want to make sure that they're happy. Okay, so the first definition that I want to talk about with you is, and I'm just going to come out of this presentation to discuss it, is one of the most common questions that we get in at fundraising through support when people are new to the platform, and this is about is active and is complete. So I'm just going to come out of there and I'm going to pop into the admin, and I'm going to go into a peer-to-peer event in this demo platform and just show you what I mean. So I'm going to pick one that's probably got quite a few people in there, Swimathon for Education. Now, whenever you open up an event in fundraising, so if you have just one event on your platform, so I know we've got the guys from the Linfield Run here, so Linfield Run only has Linfield Run on it, so it's always going to be that one event that you're seeing, but if you have multiple events on your platform, then obviously you need to choose your event first before you'll see the actual event dashboard. So if we have a quick look here, just ignore the graph because this being a demo platform, nothing's happened in the last couple of days. But if we have a look down here at our next section, this is talking about our revenue, our entries, and our teams. And you can see here that there's, when it comes to entries, we've got two different numbers. We've got the number of active participants and the number of people who actually started the fundraising, the actual registration flow. Now, when somebody registers for an event, there is usually a couple of steps, or maybe 3, maybe 4, depending on how complicated the actual registration process for your event is. Sometimes it needs to be complicated. Sometimes it's better that it's really simple. But once they go through that first step of the registration flow, that is when their details are captured. So that is when they become an entrant in fundraising, or a participant, whatever you want to call it. And that's that at that point that we store their details. So we then have their first name, last name, email address, and whatever they filled out in that first step. Everybody who goes through the entire process of registering comes out the other end with a fundraising page. They are called active participants. So they have an active fundraising page, as in they have completed the fundraising, the registration flow, and they have a fundraising page. So that is the main difference between the two. So somebody who is inactive, so is showing here that we have 34 people who are inactive. They're the people who didn't actually make it the whole way through the registration flow. So whether it's a ticketed event or whether it's just simply registering online. If you see numbers, and it's very, very common to see numbers here in the inactive section, that means that they have not completed all the steps of the registration flow. And if I can just show you an entrance record that will help make this a lot clearer. So if I go, I've gone into view fundraisers there in the white navigation, and I can see here that there's several people registering. And then what I can see here is complete and are they active? And some of them are, some of them aren't. So if I was to say, okay, well, let me try and understand why Ramona is not complete or not active. So if we go in and have a look at her record, what we'll be able to see is, and next I'm going to, everyone who's done the peer-to-peer supporter care training should be able to follow along with this really easily. I can see here that, yep, Ramona's not, she hasn't completed, but what I can see over here in this left-hand column, I was about to say right, left-hand column, is the entry steps that that person has completed. So if I click on there, I can see that Ramona has only gone through the create account step. So the first one's create account, maybe the next one is create your page, the third one might be join a team, and the fourth one might be make a personal donation, depending on how your event's
Can I just ask a question?
Yeah, Peter, yeah, for sure.
In your example here,
yeah,
is a fundraising page compulsory, i.e. as soon as you've registered, a fundraising page is set up, or not?
Yes, that's correct, yeah.
Okay, so if somebody's registered and clicks away,
yeah,
without doing anything with regard to fundraising, they're still active?
Do you mean like in an event where they don't get a fundraising page, or
no? So if they've finished registering,
yeah,
they automatically will, in this example, get a fundraising page, and doesn't
correct.
matter what they do.
Yes,
it will be there. Okay,
yes.
thank you.
Yeah, yes, of course.
Can I also ask a question along the same line?
Of course.
The Linfield Fund Run has been going for 25 years, and there has never been any donation capability because we were using another platform that can only do register for the run, but
Gotcha.
no donation facility. And
yeah.
It is quite likely that in a few weeks' time, when we open up for registration, there will be a lot of people who have never seen donations before and might not even be interested.
Okay.
Are you now forcing them to have a donation page, even if they?
That will depend on your event setup. So I'm not across what has been set up for you, but there is the option in some of the event setups that we have, and this would probably be a better conversation for the project manager who has created your setup, because the system is so flexible, that you can have it that people don't get fundraising pages automatically. That's completely possible, and that choice can be made during the registration flow. No, I don't want to fundraise, or yes, I do. But that would be very specific to your event, and yeah, you definitely need to check with the PM what the setup is at the moment.
Okay, thanks. We'll discuss it further offline.
Yeah, cool. Yeah. Okay, great. But yes, there are infinite options essentially with regard to that sort of thing. Okay, so let's have another look at our entrance, and let's have a look at somebody who is, sorry, back to my event. back to the Swimathon for education. And let's grab somebody who is a fundraiser and is active. So we've got Sav here. And if we go into edit this event for Sav, we can have a look at her entry steps. And what you can see there is she's gone through all 4 steps of the registration flow. So when you're managing your campaign, there's a few things that you can do along the way that will help boost those numbers if your focus is fundraising. So yeah, I completely understand that sometimes that is not the focus or not the primary focus anyway. But if it is your primary focus, then you can run reports through the data export area, and you can ask our team to actually add a field to your, say, a fundraisers report. If we have a look down here in our data exports, we could, to a fundraisers report, we could create a new export, or we could just use one that already exists. And we could say to the fundraise and support team, can you please add the field for me that shows the last step that this person completed, so that you can see if there is sort of any commonality throughout that process that is stopping people completing registration. So if you notice that it was the same step for 90% of people who hadn't completed, then you might like to have a little look at that step in your registration flow and just see if there's any refinements that you can make to that to improve that user experience and help you understand why people aren't going past that point. So that's a pretty important thing to be checking regularly, is if we go back into that online event.
There's no auto email for people who opened but didn't register, or in other words, people who didn't.
Not an automated one, but what we do make available is the data to actually send out to, say, a tool like Campaign Monitor or MailChimp or Autopilot, or any you can download the data for any, and you can just pull together all the people who are perhaps not active, and you can send them an email and say, hey, why don't you come back and register? So that's what probably 90% of the organisations who use fundraising, they would do that. Some don't bother, but I guess the fact that you've already sort of paid money to get people to see the site in the first place through ads and that sort of thing, it's probably a good idea to follow up with them. So what you could do there is download the entry data and then segregate those people who are inactive and send them to a list in Campaign Monitor or MailChimp and get them to come back and finish their registration. So the system will remember them when they come back to the site. It'll know who they are. It'll store all their details from last time, and they'll just be able to continue on with the registration flow. So that's definitely a good tool to be using throughout your recruitment period for your event. Okay, the other things that we can see in our dashboard here. So usually you would see a whole bunch of graphs here that show you how many donations, how many teams, and how many entries that you have. So that's always good to keep an eye on. And then you've got a few more kind of breakdowns of the different information around revenue. So if you have tickets, that'll sit with your entry fees, donations and merchandise. So if you're selling t-shirts, it'll give you just a snapshot of where the revenue is coming from, and then the entry breakdown here. So the other field the other option that is pretty common in registration flows is for you to say to the registrant, why don't you invite your friends along to come and join you as part of the challenge? So if I'm doing the May 50K, I might like to say to my friends Susan and Joe, I might like to have the system send them a little email saying, hey, come and join LA in doing the May 50K this year. So what we can see here is how many people have been invited. So what happens when somebody is invited through the system is that they receive an email with a link to come and register on the site. But because when the system is asking me about Susan and Joe, it's asking me what's their first and last name, what's their email address, because obviously it needs that to be able to invite them. But there is the option to add a couple more pieces of information around who they are and those sorts of things. So what you can do is push out those invitations during my registration flow to Susan and Joe. And then if they want to join, they come back in and they sign up themselves. Some of their details are obviously stored, so they are just going through a sort of a reduced registration flow. So it's kind of handy. But what that does is when they are invited, it stores them as complete N and active N. So this here is just giving you an indication as to how many people have actually been invited. So if you see a really high inactive rate, but you've also got a really high invited rate, then it's probably good that you know that a lot of those people who are inactive are people who have been invited by other people. So again, the same thing with the email. You could be sending out that email to those people who are invited, and there's just two pieces of data that you need for that. It's that they're inactive and there is invited. And what that will do is that will allow you to choose the right people who just need that gentle reminder that their friend has invited them to be part of the event, because they're not really the same as people who just haven't completed the registration flow. So hopefully that makes sense to everybody. If it's not, please ask me to re-explain any of it, or just pop in a support ticket if you do need further assistance when you're actually running your event, because I know sometimes it's you hear it now, but then you don't need to do anything about it for 3 months. So things can get lost along the way. So that's a bit of an indication as to what's going on in those dashboards, and what you can see. So your recent donations, recent teams, all sit there in the dashboard. So hopefully that's given everyone a fairly useful explanation of what is complete and what is active is. If anyone's still unsure, just let me know. Okay, so we have dashboards for several different things in fundraising. So obviously you want to be able to have a high level view of how things are going, but then you also want to get down into the nitty gritty of your entrance and of your donations, because you might have specific analysis that you want to do, and you also want to get an indication of what is going to happen in the future. You want to be able to predict that if we are running, I'll use the example of say the May 50K again, if we're starting registrations in say January or February, that we want to be able to predict that down the track heading into May, we're going to have the amount of registrants that we want, and that they're going to be fundraising at the level that we expect them to be fundraising to meet our targets for entrance and for fundraising. So let's have a little look around the dashboard again, slightly different dashboards now. And so just if anyone's unsure, the top level dashboard here that we have is for your whole site. So it's not going to show you today's event, it's just showing you the whole site. So if you have one event on your site, sure, it's the most recent dashboard for that event. If you have lots of different events, then this one is showing you an aggregate of data across all of your events, and you will need to go further into the actual event area to look at the dashboard for your specific event. But what we also have is insights on entrance and insights on donations. So we'll start with entrance, seeing as we're talking about peer-to-peer campaigns here. So if I go into entrance, the path that I'm using is into entrance in fundraising. I can't even say fundraising properly anymore after 4 years at fundraising. Here we go. So I've gone into insights. And what this does is this gives me a look at what's happening on this platform, and I can have a little look through the different insights for this particular campaign or this whole site, depending on the setup that you have. So this is showing you the average raise per person, the average number of donations per person, and how many profile views that the fundraising pages have had across the time. It also shows you how many views from people clicking share this on Facebook through their fundraising page. And then we also have a whole bunch of data here about individual fundraisers and how they're interacting with their pages. So these are the things that give you that indication as to what sort of fundraiser someone will be, how engaged they are with your organisation or your event, and how likely they are to, you know, complete the challenge and actually fundraise for you. So you've got a few indicators here. And we all know that, I guess, that we give people the options to do lots of different things in their dashboard, because each thing that they do sort of connects them to the cause, connects them to the event. And then the more that they share that page, you know, throughout the campaign, obviously it stands to reason that the more chance there is that their friends will see that they're taking part and want to support them by either joining the event or donating to their page. So either way, you're looking to increase participation and donations at the same time. So a few things that we have here is blogs added. So what we mean by blogs added is on the fundraisers page. Let's have a look at an example of this. Fundraise.campquality. I think I pulled this example up yesterday. And if we go to events, oh, there's nobody taking part anymore. That's last year's one. Okay. I must have recently archived that event. Sorry, folks. Okay, let's have a look at something like September. This might still be live. This time of year is a little bit difficult. It's not a lot of fundraising going on. Not a lot of peer-to-peer events anymore. So let's have a look at individuals in September. And just pick somebody. Nope, that's static as well. Geez, they're all just giving me a hard time today, aren't they? All right, one more time, stride for stroke, and then we'll give up and move on. All right, so stride for stroke, we have find a strider, and we're going to grab somebody. Let's grab someone with fundraising page and something. Okay, so what I'm talking about when I talk about the fundraiser blog is this section of the page here, which everybody, when they sign up to an event, has the option to actually add to this page. So this is the main copy that's across all of the pages that your organisation says, this is what we want everyone to show on their page. But then they can add additional blogs to the page. So further down the page, they get like a standard blog. So it's like the most recent one sits to the top, and they can talk about their engagement in the event. I did my training run today. I did 8 kilometers today, those sorts of things. And they might want to add a photo. There's all sorts of stuff that they can do with the blogs, things like even using TikTok, YouTube videos, Facebook Live, all sorts of crazy stuff. And, you know, all of that is kind of part of fundraising, is being able to share things in that way. And then what they do is over time, they will add a new update and then share their page again and show their friends what they're doing now. And that obviously leads to more donations. So if we have a look at these entrants and we say, okay, loads of people are adding blogs to their pages. That's great. These are people who have gone out of their way to actually add information to their page. People who have added their profile pic. So if we use the stride for stroke example again, Paige here, her pages page, goodness me. She's added her profile picture to the page. So this is the sign that somebody is quite engaged in what they're doing. They want to add their own photograph to the page. If they haven't added it, you'll just see like a little kind of grey outline here of a person's head or whatever it is that you want to add to that section. And it's, you know, it's not as exciting as having your own photograph on the page. So on pages, sorry, I can't get over that. That's kind of a silly thing to say over and over again. So when she's sharing that, people will get that coming up in Facebook, that Paige's image, Paige is taking part in Stride for Stroke, let's support Paige. But if it just said Paige Hooper and didn't have her own image and just had like the little grey outline, not as engaging for her friends to kind of go, oh wow, go Paige, you know, it's a little less exciting and a little, you know, Paige is maybe not as engaged as what she could be. And there's other things as well that will certainly show whether somebody is likely to be a good fundraiser. And the other one is, has she made a personal donation? So you can see here that Paige Hooper did actually donate to her own page. So that is a real, those kind of two things together, if we look at added profile pics and self-sponsored, two really strong indications that somebody has a high propensity to fundraise for your organisation. Obviously, sharing their page is the most important thing that we want them to do. And even some people will go out of their way to increase their goal during the actual campaign, as you know. And if they're increasing their goal, then hopefully it's because they've hit their goal, or maybe it's because they just feel really confident that they're going to get there. But that again is another sign that that person is going to be a great fundraiser for you. What you can actually do is in your fundraiser reports in the data exports area is add fields like those to the fundraising report. So you can keep a really good eye on who's uploaded their profile pic, who's shared their page, who's increased their goal, those sorts of things. So I'll just show you quickly where that would be. So I've opened up a fundraisers data export. So using the data source fundraisers, and I'm into the export fields area. And what I'm doing is I'm going to select a field from any of these that I can add myself. And what I might be looking for is, have they shared their page or have they made a personal donation? So here we go. We've got personal donation here, last logged in, so we can see when they last actually accessed their page. Have they uploaded their photo? And there's a few other things here as well, which are a bit more sort of functional, like what wave are they involved in and that sort of stuff. But here's those fields that I was talking about before as well. Is invited, has been invited, and also invited by. So those two pieces of information are really handy when you're doing your comms, is knowing who someone was invited by. And then we can also store the last clicked UTM that somebody has come in through as well. So you can also use this to show which part of your advertising is kind of working the best. So is it your EDMs? Is it your Facebook ads? You can, if you're using UTMs while you're actually on the clicks for those in Facebook and in your EDMs, then we will store the last clicked one against whichever term it is. And I would encourage you to add those fields to your fundraisers reports as well, so that you can just see how that's all going as well. So if I wanted to add has updated, has put in their photo, I would just click on that one here and I would say, you know, profile pic and add that field. So that's going to give me a yes or no in that field. And then I might also want to add in self-donation. So I might come here and I will say, where was that personal donation? There's so many of them, isn't there? Personal donation. And we'll call that self-donation. So you don't have to call the field what the database field is called. So here you're choosing from the fundraising database, and here you're calling it what you want to call it. So if we save that, we can then download that report and have a look at who's got those fields and who hasn't. We'll just do a quick demonstration of that. I don't know if these people are going to have any data in their fields, but we'll just do a quick download of that. So I'm downloading a CSV file now, and I'm not sure if you're going to be able to see this over the top. That's taking a few minutes, quite a large report. Can you guys see that over the top of my page there? You can see an Excel spreadsheet. Yep.
Yes.
Yep. So we can see here that we've got a profile pic and we've got a self-donation as well. So that's all very handy to know about each person as they come through.
Can I ask a question? Can you set triggers based on something like self-donation?
Yeah, for sure. So in the platform setup, we've got our triggers.
Mm-hmm.
So any, if I go to click setting a new trigger, if you have a look here in the what's available in the triggers this will show you that there's interactions. So has uploaded profile pic, has added new blog. So you can set up an email that will go out to that person saying, hey, good on you for setting up your profile pic. Thanks for increasing your target. Thanks for adding a blog, you know, all helps people understand, you know, why you're taking part. But then there's also the ones around how much people have raised and how many kilometers or steps or whatever it is that they've added. So yes, definitely.
Okay, that's very good.
Yep. But that's triggers are based on what they have done, not what they haven't done. Yep. Excellent. Okay. So if we go back to our entrance and into our insights again. So like we were just saying, the interactions, it's important to be able to see, you know, who's doing what. And then you've got a few other graphs there that are kind of handy that you can just export and pop into your, you know, your reports at the end of your campaign. But the other area of insights that's really useful to have a look around in is if I go to donations and then insights. Here is, so this data is obviously way off because it's a demo platform. We can see here, again, our average donation, which for you, it might be more like, you know, $30 or $50. The largest donation might not be 4 million, smallest donation, and how the percentage via mobile. I mean, we generally recommend that you design your campaigns for mobile. So you always sort of think mobile first. And this number here, which is only 2%, because it's a demo platform, it's generally always used on desktops. It's not used on mobile phones. But for you, you'll be able to see here actually how many people are accessing your site and donating via mobile. So that's kind of handy to be actually aware of that number. This also shows you here to your top performing dollar handles. So on the fundraising page, you will have your dollar handles. So here it's 45, 75, 137 and 500 for the Stride for Stroke. Here we can see which is the most commonly donated amount, which is £1,000 on this one. And it goes from there, showing you which are your most common ones. And we also have it separated out by which is the most common personal donation amounts. So that's top own amounts is personal donations. And then for regular giving, we have top recurring amounts. And then we also show you what the top days for donations are during your campaign and the top donation pages that you have as well. So that's probably not as interesting for peer-to-peer. Top days is though, and the dollar handles, keeping an eye on those dollar handles and making sure that you are actually thinking about how you might tweak them. So if you were seeing that most people were donating, say, the $45, then you might want to consider, you know, increasing that. You might want to, if most people were choosing to donate their own amount rather than the dollar handle, then you might sort of say, okay, maybe our dollar handles aren't quite right for this campaign. We might need to consider dropping them down or just having one that's, you know, maybe below that $45 mark, and maybe between 45 and 75, we might want to consider actually adding one in that's maybe $56 or whatever it is. But you can tell that by looking at these dollar handles and just really understanding how people are using them. Again, you've got graphs that you can use for your reporting. Some of them are more interesting than others. I mean, donations by gender, I don't know how that's really relevant to anything, but it's there, I suppose. But yeah, so this information at the top is also, you can customize it by which year you would like to see the amounts for. So if we were to change it to 2019, you can see that that changes. And then, you know, maybe 2018, a little bit different. So you can track the progress in your average donation as well through the platform, through the insights. So hopefully those things, have a play with them. It's all just there. So you either go to entrance and then insights, and donations and then insights. It's both in the same place, whichever one that you're looking at. We do have insights around teams as well. So if you're a teams-based event, it can be interesting to have a look at what is there about team size and all that sort of stuff. But If you're not Teams based, it's probably not that interesting to you, but we do have quite a few that are that way. So why don't things always add up? I think it's a pretty common question through support as well. So if we go to the front of this site, just to the home page, we've got some amounts here. So together we've raised $456,134. That's great, isn't it? Fantastic, good on them. And the minutes moved, and they've got the number of people taking part and how many teams. So those are all calculations that are out of the database and placed onto the home page. To ensure the stability of your site, so I mean, like if you get a lot of traffic, you might send out an EDM to 20,000 people or even 5,000 people. And if you're sending them all to this homepage to have a look at, how well fundraising is going, it's not a great idea to have these particular calculations be live, because what that will do is every person who lands on that page, it will force the database to go and calculate that. It'll go and calculate every single donation, all the minutes moved, how many entrants, how many teams. So it has to do those 4 calculations like that. So what we do here is we cache these for up to 30 minutes sometimes. And that means that we just don't allow the page to refresh itself every time somebody lands on the page. So if you're having a day where, say it's a match giving day, and you have $50,000 worth of donations come through in small amounts all throughout the day, you might not notice that together we've raised amount goes up as quickly as what it does in the back end. The back end is always 100% accurate. The front end is generally cached. So most days it won't be noticeable, but at times when you're really watching it, at the times where it's like high traffic or a big push for donations, you might notice that the two don't necessarily add up. And that's because the front end is probably about 15 to 30 minutes behind the back end. And as I said at the start, the reason for that is to ensure that your site doesn't crash. So that's probably the more important thing than having that exact donation amount on the front. But usually it doesn't necessarily cause you any problems because it's such a small difference. So does anyone have any questions about any of that stuff before we kind of move on a little bit to the whole what's normal? I don't want to keep talking if you've got, things that I haven't covered enough for you yet. And I also need a drink of water. No questions? Okay, we'll keep going. Let's have a little look here. So the tools that we use to analyze performance, the magic numbers that I like to call them. So that's your conversion rate from the recruitment funnel to completing the actual registration. So as I said to you, the first part of that, getting people into the site, it's not something that fundraising is kind of, part of, but the completion of those registrations is definitely something that we can advise and assist you on. Then we want to know who is actually fundraising. After they've completed registering, who is fundraising, who's made a personal donation, who's uploaded their profile pic, and who's sharing their page. Now, what I showed you with data exports is how you can get all of that information into a report and stay up to date with that. So you might want to run that report every 2 to 3 business days, perhaps, if you've got a really fast moving campaign with lots of entrants. If it's, early on, you might just want to run it once a week, just to keep in touch with everything. But one of the things that I would like to show you is a really great way as to how to keep in touch with how many people of your entrants are actually fundraising. So of course you can add amount raised into your data exports, and that will show you how many people are actually fundraising. But what you can do also is, if we were to go to entrants, we can run a search. And then from that search, we can create something called a smart list. And a smart list is a list that actually keeps itself up to date at all times. So it creates what's called a cron, which is essentially like a little program in the back end that says, hey, when you see anybody who reaches this search criteria, add them to my list. So let's have a look at how that works. So if I want to, let's say I want to know how many people who have raised $5 or more. So they're my people who are actually fundraising. We go to search. And first of all, we might like to say, what would we want to say about them? We don't really need to know if we might want to say, let's do it for, what was that event that we were looking at? The swim for something. Where's that gone? Oh, sorry, I need to choose my event. So lots of events in here, isn't there? Gosh, I think it's called Swim for Education. Here we go, Swim for Education. If I wanted to check everybody in this event who was actually fundraising, I would say in Swim for Education, give me everyone who is active, and then also give me people who have raised over $5. I choose $5 because sometimes there's an entry fee and the little optional contribution might kind of throw off your numbers because that goes through as a donation. So I'm just saying everyone who's active in this event and has a, oh, sorry, not target over, pardon me, has raised over $5. So you've got definitely a few options to work with there. So this gives me everyone who's raised more than $1 in this event, and that's pretty cool. But then I can say, turn this into a smart list, which is this top section over here. So I would say raised $5 or more is the name of my list, and I'll save it. And then now, as every person who starts fundraising in this event gets a donation, it will update my list. So if I go to Smart Lists down the bottom in Tools, I can see that my list here is raised $5 or more, and it was last updated just now. If I go in there and I can see who's in there, how many people we've got, and I can download that list as well. But as I said, as Joe and Susan join the event and they start fundraising, there'll be 14 and 15 people and 27 people, hopefully, and thousands of people. But this just gives you an indication as to, like, keeping this as a smart list. It just gives you that little always on way of knowing how many people across the board are fundraising for your event. So let's have a little look at our next slide, which is about conversion rates. So just pop this one up here. So as we were saying at the start, there is some, I guess there's a broad range of normal for conversion rates. So, and by this conversion rate, I mean people actually completing registration flows and getting their fundraising page, or not, if that's the case for your event, if you're giving them the option to decide if they want to fundraise or not, or if everybody's not getting a fundraising page. So in peer-to-peer events, I mean, on Fundraising, we run thousands of peer-to-peer events every year, and registration events, ticketed events, mass participation events. And what we see is that if you're getting above 75% of people completing the registration flow and becoming active in the event, you're doing really, really well. It's not the most common number to see, and it's definitely at the top end of, of what is normal. That next section down, 65 to 75% of people completing, is the average. That's the kind of middle section that most of the campaigns will fit into. So if you are sitting at either of those points, so if you're at 65 or above for percentage of people completing the registration flow, what we would suggest that you do is just maybe get our team at a certain point in the campaign, not right near the end, but kind of closer to the, in the middle of the recruiting period, to set up that report for you so you can actually see, of those 35% of people, where are they actually getting stuck and why aren't they completing? Like, you can start to try and analyze why that's happening, and then you can take steps to help improve that. So we can give you advice on that to a degree, or you can work with your fundraising consultant on that if you use one of those. But just knowing where people are getting stuck can sometimes be really helpful. So it's good to check that. If you're getting below 65% of people completing the registration flow, it's really important that you kind of notice this early on and you kind of act on it early on. So what we would recommend that you do is consider adding something like Hotjar or Full Story to your site, which is like a heat mapping tool that shows you where people click and what they do once they're on your site. So our Creating Awesome Events training is all about how you can make that homepage and that registration flow as conversion worthy as possible, and to make sure that you do get the best out of your advertising dollars that you're spending, through Facebook or whatever it is that you're doing. So what happens when somebody is on the site can be quite interesting. If you're noticing that if you set up Full Story or Hotjar, whichever one that you use, I would suggest to everybody, Full Story is excellent, and they do offer a 2-week free trial. So what you can do is kind of start your recruitment, maybe get 3 or 4 weeks in. If you're happy with things, great, keep going. If you're thinking that things are a little bit below par, then you might want to add Full Story on at no cost to you for 2 weeks. And this will just basically record what people do on the site, where they click, what they do. And you'll notice some interesting things. You'll notice that sometimes people go into the registration flow and then they realize that they've got questions that really they need to have answered before they complete their registration flow. Where is it on? What time does it start? Can my friends be, involved as well? Are people going to get, donation receipts for this that are tax deductible? And they'll start clicking around on other different pages in your site. So if you notice those things happening, you might want to look at how informative the home page is, or the landing page that you're having people land on, to make sure that you are covering all the bases there. So that's what the heat mapping tools are really good to help you with. And you'll see people do the weirdest things that you just think, wow, I didn't think anyone would ever click on that after that, and then go back to there. And you see things like how Full Story have this one called rage clicks. And this is when somebody clicks on something a lot because maybe it's not working. And that can show you that, oh my goodness, we've got a broken link. That's what's happening. So those sorts of things can really be handy. So Hotjar and Full Story are probably the 2 most commonly used ones. Hotjar's got a load of other functions as well, but Full Story do offer that 2-week trial. Okay. So the next conversion is to fundraising. So this is probably not as relevant to everyone today, but what we see again across that broad range of events is that anything above 60% of people fundraising in your event is fantastic. So that's, well done. You're obviously, your fundraising journeys are really hitting the mark. You're talking to people in the right way, all that sort of stuff. If you're noticing 40 to 60% of people, so let's say you set up your smart list and you can see that the amount of people fundraising is around that 40 to 60% of participants in your event, this can be a broad range of issues. But if you, and it's not really the area that we kind of offer a huge amount of advice in, because fundraising, that's definitely your area. But we do have all those tools around, your gamification, your triggers and automations that can really help encourage people once they have taken an action, so they can get the badge or the next badge, they can see the next badge coming up, all those sorts of things. So that's where fundraising can be helpful, is making sure that you've got that sort of, I guess, competitive path for people to travel throughout the event. But if you're noticing 40% or less of people are actually fundraising, then it's not necessarily a big deal, especially if your event is a cycling event. So the sort of general consensus that we find across cycling events is there's a lower amount of people fundraising when it's just a standard, sign up and come and ride with us. But they tend to raise a higher amount of money as individuals. So it kind of pans out. So that's just one thing that is probably worth noting, that cycling, you need to get more people in the funnel if you want them to fundraise. But when they do, they fundraise really well because they're a naturally competitive bunch. Okay.
Have you got a figure for fun runs?
Fun runs? No, I don't. I could definitely find one for you though.
Yeah, that would be nice.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, we've got a few of those. Can definitely look into it for you, Peter.
Thank you.
Yeah, no worries. Cool. And of course, the number would depend on how their event was set up, essentially. Like, were they encouraging everyone to fundraise, and did everyone get a fundraiser prize? Those sorts of things. But we can definitely provide you with some anonymised data around that.
we just need to set a target. So.
Yeah, cool. No, I understand. Okay, and especially like the first time fundraising with your event. That's I can understand why. If you don't have a history to draw on, it makes it a little more challenging. Yeah, cool.
But I'll confirm that our cycling event, which has been running for 10 years, maximum we've ever had is 30%.
30%. There you go. So yeah, okay.
So in your terms, that's not good.
Well, but as I said, if they're raising a lot of money, it's probably not the end of the world.
Right.
Yeah, it's not the end of the world. Cool. All right. How are we doing for time? Am I eating into anyone's lunch at the moment? I have very little to continue on with, but let's go back to it. So a few tips for optimizing your campaigns is using that analysis of the donation insights to keep on top of your dollar handles. And if you're noticing that the dollar handles aren't really reflecting what people are actually donating, maybe consider throughout the campaign tweaking those dollar handles and seeing if you can actually, I know sometimes it's not possible because, for say someone like the Fred Hollows Foundation, it costs $25 to restore site. You can't really make that $27 or $32. It's $25. But if you have flexibility in the way that you can explain where the money goes, then it's definitely worth optimizing those dollar handles throughout the campaign. Looking at last year's data obviously is a great start, but as Peter's just pointed out, if you don't have last year's data, it's good to be able to look at what the industry norms are, and participant analysis based on those magic numbers. So making sure that you've got that fundraisers report and that you're adding those fields to it and looking at that regularly. How many people are updating their profile pic? How many people are adding blogs? How many people are fundraising? Is that reflected in our comms? Are we reminding people to do those things so that they can more effectively share their page? So segmentation of your data in the fundraiser journey through the integrations with Campaign Monitor and MailChimp, Autopilot and Salesforce. I think that everybody is probably quite handy on at least one of those tools. And because we integrate with them directly, you can just pipe the data straight in and base your fundraiser journeys and segments on specific parts of the data, whether it might be amount raised, whether it might be that journey for incomplete registrants, or it might be that sort of high propensity fundraiser journey where you're really kind of talking to them about fundraising and thanking them and those sorts of things because they are already doing really well for you. And making sure that you're tracking everything really closely through, Google Tag Manager, using your UTMs in your EDMs so that you can see where people are coming from and actually what messages that they're responding to the best. I know you can see a lot of this stuff in Facebook and GTM, but sometimes it's really good just to have that backup data in the platform of, that's exactly what's going on. And don't be afraid to kind of just test things and iterate a little bit along the way. Fundraising is a really flexible system. So once your registration flow is out there in the wild, it doesn't mean that's it set in stone forever. You can make tweaks. I wouldn't make a lot of tweaks and I wouldn't make them regularly, but if you sort of notice something that you're a little bit concerned about, especially if there's a specific point where people are dropping off in the rego flow, and say you put on a tool like Full Story and you go, I see what's happening here. People are not understanding this particular element, or they think that this thing means that that's the end of the registration flow. Maybe there's some tweaking that needs to be done there. Okay.
Can I just ask you, what exactly is a UTM?
So a UTM is it's essentially what you would add to the end of a URL in like a email communication. So it kind of personalizes that URL, and what it means is that we grab that little piece of data that you put on the end of the URL so that we know exactly where that person clicked that link. So in an EDM, the UTM might be, it's an EDM and it is from the list called, Happy Fundraisers, and there is, a certain element that you want to use. But if you just Google UTMs and how to add them into emails, that will be really handy. And you can add them to the ends of your URLs in Facebook ads, wherever you are. And there's some good information on our support site as well about tracking and analytics as well.
Okay.
And a couple more minutes just on the finance team. So as I was saying at the start, keeping the finance people happy, really important part of campaign management. It's you don't want to push the problem down the road, essentially. You want to make sure that you're capturing everything that you need to, so that, in 3 months' time, maybe if they're then coming back to reconcile the entire event, then there's not going to be problems. Fundraising offers you quite a few different options. So we have some reconciliation time savers. So it means that you can add GL codes to your events. So general ledger codes can be added into the actual setup of the event so that every donation that comes through that event has that GL code applied to it. So then when your finance team pull their report on transactions, they can see that their GL codes are already against the different donations, so they know where to code everything to straight away. You can also use the receipt prefixes, and we have 2 really good articles on the support site about these, how to add in your receipt prefixes. So what this means is, let's just jump into the back end to have a look at this just quickly. If I go to donations here, I can see that all of my donation receipt numbers start DON. Now, if I was running 5 different events on this platform, I might say to myself, well, having DON, that's kind of makes it difficult to track where the donation actually went to. So I might say that there's an ABC, a DEF, or whatever makes sense to, to your particular campaign. And then what we actually do is send that DON number across to Stripe when the payment is processed. So by changing that from DON to say ABC, or, if it's capital campaign, it might be CC at the beginning of that. So whatever makes sense for that particular campaign that you're running, whether it's peer-to-peer or an appeal, you would update the actual prefix to reflect that. So that means we send it to Stripe, and then Stripe bring that back in the payment payouts, so that what the accounts people see going through the bank account matches up with what they see in fundraising, and it's all very easy for them to identify where money needs to be coded to, which is one of the, I guess, the bugbears of the finance team, is knowing exactly where all your money needs to go, because it's all going through the one bank account. So that's pretty handy to keep that stuff. We have reports set up automatically in fundraising for you that are called transaction reports and donations reports. So you've got a transactions master report and a donations master report when your site is set up. That is generally enough for the accounts people. And the reason there's 2 is that donations are in the donations report. They're also in the transactions report, but the transactions report will also include things like shop sales, ticket sales, registration fees, all those sort of things, because they're not donations. So because donations are treated obviously very differently for taxation purposes and reporting, we do allow you to see the two kind of separately, but also together as well as transactions in general.